recently watched a video from someone named, I think it's Anna Gabrielle, sorry if I got that wrong, and she was basically discussing her experiences as an autistic person working, just in general, doing any sort of paid work and trying to make a living, and that video really helped me, so I thought that I would discuss my experiences in hopes that it helps at least one person or makes someone at least feel less alone. That's definitely what her video did for me. Ever since I was little, I knew that I didn't fit in. I knew that people didn't like me. I was the weirdo. I could never say anything right. I still don't. I'm still very awkward. I still struggle with pretty much every social interaction in my life. Apologies if I am struggling to articulate. I do struggle to verbally articulate a lot of my feelings and thoughts, and that's why I prefer to write them down. So apologies if I'm fidgeting throughout this video because not only was I recently diagnosed with autism, I was also diagnosed with ADHD, inattentive type, which doesn't mean I fidget as much, but it also means that my mind wanders a lot and daydreams and just sort of, I can't pay attention to a lot of things for a long period of time. So yes, I was diagnosed very recently. It was very expensive in Australia to even go through that process, which was incredibly scary in the first place because I wasn't entirely sure. I was sure I had already self-diagnosed before considering assessment, but I was scared that the assessor wasn't going to agree, wasn't going to see, because I've been masking for so long, I was scared that she wasn't going to be able to see all of the traits that I was telling her that I deal with, and that indicate that I'm autistic. Instantly she knew that I probably had ADHD, and after a few tests she also suspected I had autism as well. So luckily I had a really, really good assessor, but it's an incredibly difficult process and incredibly expensive. So I think self-diagnosis is completely valid. That leads me to selective mutism. So basically I've dealt with selective mutism since I was born. There have just been certain social situations where I've been so overstimulated and so overwhelmed and so anxious that I physically cannot speak, and that really sucks. To be honest, it's really, really, really horrible on your self-esteem. People who have commented on it, and I understand that it's hard to understand. There's also just not a lot of awareness around people who are autistic and people who struggle with selective mutism. So people just don't understand it. And so if they don't understand it, they judge you and they decide that they don't like you because they just can't understand why someone might not speak or can't speak. When I started dance classes when I was younger, I was so incredibly anxious and nervous. I wasn't actually a completely horrible dancer, but the idea of interacting with all the other people in my class and having to make friends was too scary for me. So I, from the beginning, just didn't speak. I don't think I physically could a lot of the time. And it got to the point where I danced for probably 4 years. I did dance classes, maybe longer, and the entire time I had not said a single word to any of my classmates or to my teacher. I was basically non-verbal. I was just known as the girl who doesn't speak, basically. That's how they would introduce me to new dancers. They would literally have to tell them, oh, by the way, Georgie doesn't speak. And the thing is, I absolutely loved to dance. I really enjoyed it most of the time. But I could not speak to anyone. I couldn't contribute socially. And so eventually I had to leave. I had to stop dancing because I wasn't cooperating, with everybody else, and I wasn't making friends, and it made it so difficult for me to enjoy it. I was lucky enough that a lot of the time my teachers would actually prefer quiet students. So they liked me because I was the quiet, well-behaved student in class, and that was easy for them. But I did come across a few teachers who, one in particular, who in a parent-teacher interview that I was also present in, basically the teacher told me that I was going to struggle in life in general and that he was worried about me. Up until this point he hadn't said anything like this to me, so it really came as a shock for him to say this to me in front of my parents. I didn't know how to react. I pretty much instantly shut down and just didn't expect him to say that, because basically he was telling me that I haven't been a good enough student. So once again he was telling me that I wasn't doing good enough. I wasn't living up to people's expectations of me. Even though I had good grades, I was doing well on my assignments, that still was not enough, because I wasn't socializing with my peers, I wasn't making heaps of friends, I wasn't engaging in social school events, and so I wasn't doing good enough. And basically he thought that this meant that I was going to struggle through life. In a way, he was right. But did his comment actually help me? No. It didn't help me at all, because all it did in that moment is make me more insecure about myself and unsure of how to deal with being as quiet as I was and being autistic, basically, and being the weird kid who didn't fit in. At one point, my parents got really worried about me, I think, and decided to contact someone at school. This is while I'm in high school. The student support center or something like that, and basically reached out to them to try and see if they could support me a little bit more through school, because I was really struggling at this point. This was, I think, grade 11, and I just wanted to get through school. I just wanted it to be over, and they didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to support me. I was severely depressed, which now looking back, it was probably autistic burnout, actually, that I was going through. It was making it very hard for me to cope with school and keeping up with my schoolwork, and also everything else that obviously you deal with being a teenager. So they reached out to people, and I'm not sure why, but apparently one of my teachers, instead of someone who was actually trained to support students mentally, for some reason one of my teachers, he was my maths teacher, decided to have a little chat with me. And I vividly remember him basically sitting me down and saying, "So I hear you're not doing well. You seem like a bit of a loner." And I remember just thinking, how is that helpful? That was pretty much all he had to contribute. And I said, I didn't know what to say, actually. I just sort of sat there. I think I started crying a little bit because I wasn't sure how to express what I was feeling to this teacher that I barely knew, who didn't know how to support me at all. He seemed to apparently be the only one who was available to sit down and have a conversation with me. And that was pretty much it. I think he said something about, you should try and make more friends, you should try and sit next to someone in class, which I have already tried to do, but because everybody else sort of had their friend groups, and because I struggled so much with making friends, it hadn't worked. But that was his advice, and pretty much that was it. So I battled through the rest of my schooling. So my camera just died. Of course. So yes, basically school was absolutely a horrendous experience for me. I wouldn't say I was masking heaps, but it was having to be around people for that many hours of the day and be switched on, and just have to follow this very strict schedule that I had no control of, and that didn't accommodate a lot of my sensory issues. And yes, I basically fell into a period of in and out of very bad depression and burnout the entire time I was in school, which was very confusing. And I reached a point where I didn't even think there was a way out of that cycle that I'd gotten into. Also, just have to interject, something that I realised is that I always thought I was such a negative, cynical person who hated life and hated the world, and I blame myself as well a lot for a lot of my difficulties. And I used to just think, like, why am I not happy? What is wrong with me? Why can I not just be like everybody else? You know, I was raised under good circumstances. My family was, you know, pretty normal. I had some friends, and I just always used to think, why can I not just be happy with this existence? Why am I always miserable and exhausted? And I actually don't think I'm a negative person at all. I'm actually quite a positive person. If I want something, I will go after it with everything that I have. I don't think that's what the issue is. I don't think I'm actually a very cynical person. I think that it just all becomes too much. Just all of these little things that I deal with as an autistic person with ADHD, it just all adds up to me becoming overwhelmed and overstimulated, and that over time just becomes so exhausting for me. In regards to work, I struggled to get a basic customer service, hospitality job, retail, whatever. I struggled to even get my first ever job simply because I couldn't get past the interview aspect, the requirement that you had to pretend to be someone else, basically, this bubbly person that I wasn't, that is required for pretty much every hospitality retail job, basically. So I think I applied to an insane amount of jobs. I would go around to places and give them my resume and would either not hear from them or wouldn't pass the interview stage, basically, because I didn't fit the personality requirements of the job. I eventually landed a job which was 1 day a week in a bakery / cafe, and what ended up happening, this was my first ever job, I was very nervous, and what basically happened was, because I struggled so much to communicate my needs, and I was basically given no training whatsoever and just expected to pick everything up straight away. So using the till to help customers, everything I was expected to pretty much know already without any guidance or training. And I remember basically being yelled at a lot until one day the owner sat down with me and said, look, I just don't think this is working out. Obviously they were very nice about it, but I remember just being so heartbroken and embarrassed that I couldn't even, that basically I was getting fired from my first ever job, and it was only 1 day a week, and I I just couldn't keep up with the expectations that were on me. Fast forward a couple of years and I end up getting a job at McDonald's. I absolutely hated it. Just the overall sensory input, the overall atmosphere of McDonald's, this particular McDonald's as well, was the exact opposite of what I needed in a job. It was horrible. It was absolutely horrible for me. I had about 2 training shifts, I think. That was nowhere near enough for me to know what I was doing and feel confident serving people, but whatever, I did my best. I ended up probably working there for about a year, and then pretty much only taking shifts when I absolutely needed the money. Otherwise I would just not take them because I hated it so much. There were horrible customers, people who were just not patient at all with me if I made a mistake or if I was overwhelmed. It was just the worst environment for an autistic person to be in, really. The noises, the light, it was just insane. And no one in the team liked me because, once again, I was very quiet and nervous, and I think the fact that I would make mistakes because I was so nervous meant that they all, I don't know, thought I was stupid, or I don't know. The point is, yeah, once again, no one liked me very much, and that didn't make it easier. So I ended up, getting out of there, thankfully. I can't believe I even lasted a year, but I quit after a year. Worked a couple of other hospitality jobs where, it was exactly the same sort of situation, where I was just having to mask so much, and even that wasn't enough to convince the owner or the manager that I was confident doing what I was doing, that I was this bubbly, energetic person that everybody else was on the team. So it always ended up me working there for maybe a couple of months. No, never any longer than 6 months to a year would I ever work anywhere. And I just couldn't keep up with everybody else. I couldn't keep up in that sort of environment. I was always so overwhelmed and stressed and just couldn't make friends. And then I got a job at Coles, which was my first really, really, really good job in terms of it wasn't as bad on my sensory issues. It didn't require a lot of serving customers and socializing with people. It was just me working in the bakery, packing bakery goods, very just manual work, packing and preparing baked items, which was the first job where I thought that I could actually handle it. I could actually get the job done well and not be completely burnt out by the end of my shift. Once again, it took me ages to get along with my team members though. Not get along, but to warm to them, and for them to warm to me and understand that I was just a quiet person and that I was a little bit different. I still didn't make any sort of friendships until right to the end. I ended up working there for 2 years, and it was only right towards the end where I had 2 sort of close co-workers who I considered friends, and they were always very nice to me. Everyone there was always actually very nice to me, and I have no complaints, but they did take a while to actually consider me a valuable part of their team, I think, because obviously they found it difficult to talk to me because I was awkward. There were still so many situations though where there were miscommunications, where I had misunderstood what was expected of me, or a customer confused me and I didn't know how to help them, and just so many little interactions that would stress me out a lot still. But luckily a lot of the work that I had to do was not customer facing, so that was the job that I've actually stayed the longest at. So actually being in university was probably the best time for me so far, because uni was incredibly flexible compared to high school. My schedule was so much less packed in. I wasn't doing 8-hour days of just listening to lectures and listening to teachers. I was able to work on my own and have my own independent study so much more often that it didn't burn me out nearly as much as high school did. And that's the kind of lifestyle that just worked perfectly for me. I was able to do my assignments in my own time, and I was able to create my own schedule, and that was amazing to me. I felt like I could finally have time to enjoy my social life with my close friends. By friends I mean like maybe 2 people. And actually have energy for other things like my hobbies. And because I was only working at Coles at this time, which was also very, very flexible, and they were always great at allowing me to take time off when I needed to for my exams or my assignments, it was just the perfect situation for me. But then when I finished uni, I didn't realize how absolutely insane that change in my life was going to be, going from having this flexible schedule finally to going into another situation like high school, where there's this strict schedule where you have to be around people 8 hours a day. You have to be working yourself to the bone pretty much 5 days a week. If I wanted to use my degree, that was my option. And it just didn't work for me. It didn't work. I was so incredibly burnt out. I ended up lasting probably just over a year, I think almost 2 years, which by the end of it I was just like, it's insane, that it's crazy that I even lasted that long. because at about the 6-month mark, I was thinking, I don't think I can do this for much longer. Yeah, luckily I stuck it out for a little bit longer and decided to quit. Ultimately, I think if I had kept going, I don't know what would have happened to me, but it wouldn't have been very good. I would have ended up just completely a shell of a human being. I think at that point I already was pretty much just like a zombie who it's very hard to explain if you haven't experienced that feeling before, of just complete exhaustion all the time. When you wake up in the morning, constantly throughout the day, you just never feel excited or energized about anything. One of the worst things, I think, being an autistic person is the guilt and the shame that I feel for how many mistakes I make and how many awkward interactions I have, and all of the just embarrassing things that have happened because I haven't understood the social expectation or the social rules. And it's been so incredibly embarrassing for me. And there's endless amounts of situations that I have to, or that come back to me every now and then. And it just makes me feel so horrible about myself. My self-esteem goes down instantly. And one of the things about also having this full-time job that I had recently is that I absolutely loved everyone that I worked with. I thought they were lovely people. They were always nice to me. This wasn't one of the jobs where I was being bullied or yelled at. So that made the guilt even more extreme, because the way I viewed it, they were doing me a favor by giving me that job. They were doing me a favor by not making me feel bad for being a little bit socially awkward, for struggling sometimes with basic work requirements. They would never make me feel bad about that, and that just made me feel more guilty for struggling with these things when no one else seemed to have a problem with these basic social rules that I could not understand. It just made me feel worse, because time and time again I would either make a mistake or there would be a miscommunication where I'd say something and completely misunderstand the conversation, or just little things would happen all the time, and they would never judge me, they would never make me feel bad about it. And it just made me feel worse, because I would finish my work day and think, why did I have to do that? Why did I have to behave that way? Why did I have to say this thing? Why do I do that? That's not actually me. But because I get so anxious and embarrassed, I just make these mistakes all the time. And the guilt is so crippling. It's so intense. Like, I just couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't take the feeling of always disappointing people and not meeting people's expectations. Basic expectations. So I couldn't do it anymore. I had to leave. And that's happened pretty much with every single job that I've ever had. Either I get bullied, or people pick up on me and don't like me from the beginning, and I end up having to leave, or people are extremely, extremely nice and understanding, and I feel so guilty that I keep disappointing people and not being able to navigate social situations like everybody else, that I have to leave. Because it's just too much.